So why does it seem that it's so difficult to buy a home right now in this market? You hear about affordability, but what goes behind that? One of the biggest things is interest rates. Everybody hears about interest rates and hears about the prime rate and what the Fed is doing and says, what does that mean and how does it impact the price of what I'm paying for this home? Well, it impacts affordability, and today I want to take a few minutes and go through how interest rates impact you buying a home and you getting a mortgage. Come on, let's step inside. Hi. So people have talked more lately about the Federal Reserve rate and Chairman Powell. You know, years ago, nobody could tell you who the chairman was over the Federal Reserve, but lately it seems to be such an issue. So let's just take a look at why it's an issue. Really, the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve rate came into play right around the turn of the century in the early 1900s. And the whole idea was to try and regulate lending so you didn't have one person lending at 5% and another person lending at 15%. It tried to make the playing field a little bit more even and tried to control the economy. So the rate has actually fluctuated a lot over time. Just to kind of give you an idea, back in the 1930s during the Great Depression, the rate was about 1%. And then at its peak period was in the 1980s when it was almost 20%. So obviously when this rate goes up, it directly impacts mortgages on car loans and credit card rates. And basically, as this rate goes up, it makes it more expensive to borrow money. So, from a real estate perspective and from the perspective of you wanting to buy a home, the higher the rate, the less affordability you have, which is why there is so much pressure and so much demand for the rates to come down. Now, here's the thing. When the pandemic hit, the government did something unprecedented that it had never done before. It went to a 0% interest rate to try and revive the economy where business and infrastructure was literally shut down for 30 days. So people got used to incredibly low interest rates, and the Fed had to raise them back up to restabilize the economy. And that's where we are now. We don't like it a whole lot because life is a lot more expensive. But it's done its job where the things that they were worried about are no longer factors, which leads to where is all this going? So in history, the Fed rate has been as low as 0 and as high as 20%. Could you imagine borrowing money in the 80s? Wow. People had 15, 18% interest rates. Aren't you glad we're not there? But where we're going is even more important. And the feeling is that the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering its rate over the next several sessions. And the extended feeling is that next year, they're going to be changing out chairmen. So Chairman Powell is going to be replaced by another chairperson, which most likely is going to be more aggressive about lowering the Federal Reserve rates. And when that happens, it should directly correlate to real estate and car loans and credit cards and basically lending across the board. So, what does all this mean for you buying a home? Here's what it means. The lower the interest rate, the more affordability that you have. You can borrow more money easily. If it's at a 6.5% and it lowers to a 5.5%, that will drastically adjust how much your payments are going to be each month, therefore helping your affordability. So if you are thinking of selling, is now a good time to sell with interest rates? It's a good time to sell when you have the need to sell. Now, if you are staying in a home because you have a 2.5% interest rate, we're probably not going to see those again. So you have to ask yourself, is that enough to make me stay in this property for the rest of my life? That's a question only you can answer. However, if you're a buyer and you're saying, well, what about lower interest rates? What will that mean? Here's my thought process for you. If you're ready to buy, I would begin the process now because we're going to see rates starting to go in a lower trajectory. If you wait until rates get to their lowest points, that's when every buyer, however, is going to get out there. Once that happens, there is going to be an inventory situation where there won't be enough properties for all the potential buyers entering the marketplace. So my advice to a potential buyer would be get in touch with a real estate professional you trust. Start walking through the process of getting pre-approved and going through the steps to try and get lined up for buying your home. Don't wait until you try and time the market to its lowest point. Figure out what works for your budget, what you can do now. Now might be the perfect time. 6 months from now might be the perfect time. But start the steps now if this is something you want to do. The dream of homeownership is still very much alive in the United States of America. It's still one of the best investments you can ever make, and it's one of the things that will build your net worth over time, as well as give you a sense of pride of owning something. If you have questions about real estate, I have a whole team of wonderful professionals here that can help you. Please give us a call. We'd love to give you advice on the next steps on your journey. Thanks.